Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Mariam Zia. The war against minorities in India persists with silence from the international community. And when we talk about the impact of this increasingly growing silence from the international community, it is not only on the minorities within India, but it would be having long-term impacts on those who believe in values of pluralism, of course, and democratic values at large. When we talk about the policies of Narendra Modi, we know that they are based on Hindutva ideology, infused with, of course, caste politics and growing nationalism. And of course, when we talk about Indian constitution, it provides protection to minority rights, but in practice, these constitutional rights are not being given to minorities within India. And when we talk about the unfolding development surrounding the construction of Ram Temple, it underscores a distressing narrative of growing marginalization for minorities within Indian society. And of course, this is going to be having profound impacts on the political, social and economic exclusion of minorities within India. In today's program, we will be talking about the internal shifts within Indian society, how this is going to be impacting Indian stance at international level, and of course the way that these minority rights are being exploited within India, what are its impacts on the internal dynamics of India as well, and of course with the upcoming 2024 elections in India, how this extremism is growing within Indian society and what impact it is going to be having on minority rights at large. We will be talking about all these dimensions in today's program. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Mr. Shehryar Khan, who is a commentator in international affairs. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by senior analyst Mr. Naveed Aman Khan. Welcome to the program. And we're joined online by Mr. Humayun Khan, who is senior analyst. Welcome to the program. Shehryar, let me start with you. How do you think that this evolution of political secularism in India has evolved over time, and how it has impacted minority rights with the passage of time?
So, Mariam, I think like now it's the time when the whole political system in India has moved away from secularism, and now it has like moved or morphed into a position which is more rightly can be stated as Hindu majoritarianism rather than secularism. Secularism and the whole science behind the secularist school of thought is that all different religions and castes and minorities can live in harmony and peace without the state religion being of one certain area. So what now with the BJP and the rise of the Hindutva right-wing political activism, this started in like 1980. And this is when Mr. Vajpayee first became the president of the BJP party. At that time, the whole idea of BJP was taken from the Gandhi's socialism. And that was what basically formed the BJP. And then when Advani basically took over BJP, the whole shift started moving more towards Hindu nationalism. And since then, since the 80s and the demolition of the Babri Mosque, all of the rise of the Hindutva and the rise of the BJP party as well can be equated. And since then, the whole idea of secularism in India has taken a downturn, and now it's turned into a state which is more for Hindus. The minorities are not really welcome, and there has been a systematic purge of the minorities from all government institutions, all top positions, and when it comes to public sector organizations, when it comes to private organizations, they are all with Hindu majority now. And systematically, all of the minorities, including Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, they have been systematically purged from all leadership positions across India. That is what we are observing. It's a very disturbing trend that is like coming. And this also, like if we look at it from a historical perspective, this also vindicates Jinnah's position when it came to the formation of Pakistan. And Gandhi at that time was not in the favor of formation of Pakistan, and he basically said that Muslims and Hindus, even being two different religions can live in harmony and a united India.
But Shishar, there are of course concerns within India as well regarding the safety of minorities, be it Christians, be it Muslims, be it of course Dalits as well, because the caste divide is also very much apparent in the last 2-3 decades that we are talking about. So what about those voices?
So as the right-wing nationalist or Hindutva ideology is rising, the secular and progressive voices are being systematically muted. And if you look at what India was 10 to 15 years ago, it was like more progressive, and that progressiveness has been eroded in the last like 15 to 20 years. And you can like see the whole rise of the BJP is also in parallel to all of these repressions that are taking place. Now, even if you look at the state institutions in India, their policies are very aligned with Modi's policies as well.
Even the court's decisions in line with.
Even though India still has a secular constitution, the decisions that are coming about, even with the demolition of the Babri Masjid and the formulation of this Hindu temple, it like goes against the idea of a secular constituency. And that basically means that the whole public sector or the policy making circles have aligned themselves with the BJP party, which is also like very disturbing in the fact that India basically touts itself as one of the largest democracies in the world. And if that democracy has turned into a Hindu majoritarianism, then the whole idea of democracy has really died.
Right. So, Mr. Naveed, when we talk about India, of course, it's a diverse country with 80% population comprising of Hindus, but other 20% are Muslims and other minorities. But when we talk about the recent developments specifically surrounding the construction of Ram Temple, and we see yesterday that how it was celebrated as a national event. How do you see that this construction of Ram Temple, does it align with India's basic principles as a secular country, or does it contradict it?
Secularism is a school of thought, and it is being followed by many other countries as well, and the people living in those countries are living very peacefully, and the governance in those countries is being carried out comfortably.
That's what we are advocating, that they are not even sticking to their basic founding principles.
Same is the situation with nationalism. Nationalism is a very good thing for any society. We are nationalist, and if we are talking about Indian nationalism, it is good. But Hindu nationalism is bad for India. Indian society is based on Indian Hindu nationalism. India is for every ethnic community. The Sikhs are there, the Muslims, the Hindus, the Parsis, the Christians, the Buddhists, the Jews. Every believer is living in India, and they need to live peacefully, and they are living peacefully. But being the society commanded by the Hindus, the life of the Hindus, the life of the other communities has become very difficult for them to live. We are talking about that the Ram Temple. Yes, it really reflects the Hindutva approach, or Hinduism, or the fascist approach of BJP, Modi, and RSS, because BJP is under influence of RSS, and RSS belief is fascist-based belief. And
they believe that India is only for the Hindus.
India is not for the Hindus. India is for everybody living in India.
Yeah, but RSS believes that, of course.
India is India. It is not Hindustan. But the Hindus believe that it is Hindustan. Hindustan, the Muslims are in more than 200 million living in India. So they are in big number. It is not only for for Hindus. It is for Muslims, for Sikhs, for Dalits, for Christians, for Jews, and for many others. As compared to the Chinese society,
right? Of course.
This is, in Indian society it's not harmonious society. It is a divided society, and the approach of the BJP has made more complex for it to survive within India.
Of course. And Mr. Humayun, talking about BJP's approach, how do you see that these recent developments, specifically surrounding the construction and consecration of Ram Temple, align with of course, Narendra Modi's own electoral strategy because we know that he's been observing fast since January, and all these campaigns, he's looking more of a monk than an electoral candidate when we look at the outlook of all these electoral strategy.
Thank you, Mariam. I guess it's a very, very important question, very pertinent, especially the timing of the opening of this Ram temple in Ayodhya yesterday, and the way it was telecasted not only in India but throughout different places where a lot of Hindu majority people are living, particularly in Europe and in Western countries as well. This aligns with, or this marks the election campaign of Prime Minister Modi, because as our previous participant and Shahriyar was also mentioning about that, Prime Minister Modi, if you remember, he's been the Chief Minister of Gujarat from 2001 to 14, and then he became the Prime Minister. And 2002 Gujarat riots basically is a big stigma on his political career. But he moved from that stigma and he used that stigma, and that basically becomes his electoral and ideological policy, where he believes in Hindutva policy, which believes that only Hindus or right-wing radical Hindus are the only savior of this part of the world where he's ruling right now. And he is using this incarnation of Ram's temple that has been rebuilt yesterday. And by the way, a lot of opposition parties have even boycotted the inauguration. And then even some religious people in India also did that, because according to their belief, and by the way, the temple is not completely completed, it's just the first phase. So their belief was that Prime Minister Modi is using it as an election campaign, because according to their Hindu mythology, an incomplete temple is not supposed to be open. So it has to be completed. So just see these things which are happening, which basically gives us this very strong feeling that Prime Minister Modi is basically using this to lure in these hardcore Hindu RSS mentality voters towards his side, so that the next election, where he is vouching for the third time as a Prime Minister. So this basically aligns with his strategy.
Right. So, Mr. Mayo, what do you think that these Hindu nationalist groups like RSS, what role do they play in Indian political landscape?
Since his first 2 terms, the policies that he has implemented, and you have alluded to some of them, they are basically aligned with the RSS policies, in which Prime Minister Modi is a lifetime member. And not only RSS, there are many other Hindu groups who are like Shiv Sena, there is Gaur Rakshak Dal, there are many others who basically advocate that this part of the world is only for Hindus and no other minorities has the right to live. The Citizen Amendment Act, if you see, it only allows the Hindu or voters, Hindus to become refugees who have joined India before December 2014 to gain the citizenship. But if any Muslim is there, it does not have the right. Then Prime Minister Modi's policy in Kashmir that we have seen from 2019 and even before that as well, that also alluded to this thing that this hardcore Hindutva policy will be implemented. And if Prime Minister Modi becomes third time Prime Minister again in April and May this year, I think the secular India that we used to know and the world used to know, and which was like very democratic in the past, I think it would become just a story. And things would be very hard, not only for Muslims, but also for Christians, Dalits, and other minorities in India as well.
Of course, these are important points. So, Shahriyar, when we talk about these developments, especially surrounding the political role of these Hindu nationalist group, how do you see these developments? And of course, the policies that are focused on suppression of human rights defenders as well, like journalists are being prosecuted, even the sane voices within India are being persecuted for raising their voices for minority rights. So what's the role of international community on all this?
So Mariam, first we have to understand where this ideology comes from and how it feeds into the whole BJP party. And the link between the BJP party and Humayun Sahab, as he mentioned, the RSS, which is the Hindutva paramilitary nationalist volunteer organization. So this whole RSS organization and BJP is the electoral front of RSS.
Of course.
So people who basically vote for BJP are very aligned with the Hindutva policy of RSS. And RSS can also be equated to the Nazi party in Europe as well. And they have the same philosophy and the
Right,
same
of
school of
course.
thought that like comes in. And this is where the international community needs to be aware on where the whole trajectory of India's politics is like moving towards. Yes, we like see a lot of like nationalism across the world because of like, you know, the rising inflation, global economic systems, and, you know, poverty, effects from climate change. So this, all of this like gives rise to nationalism in one way or the other. But the nationalism that is like going on in India
but
is very
BJP's
different.
policy is basically, of course, catering to the Hindu votes,
Yeah.
Hindu voters.
So BJP gets the votes out of the divisions that have been created in the Indian society, and that division is very stacked against the Muslims. And what we have to like see that a lot of like policies are very anti-Muslim or Islamophobic in nature. So let's look at the Citizen Amendments Act. When we look at the National Registrar of Citizens, and then the revocation of Article 370, that's like all very anti-Muslim in nature.
And when we look at the previous election campaign of Narendra Modi as well, of course, 3 points were paramount when we look at it. Of course, first was this Citizen Amendment Act, and then he talked about revocation of Article 2019. And then this third, the inauguration of Ram Temple was also electoral strategy. Do you think the actual societal divide is as much apparent as it is reflected in the BJP's electoral campaign?
Mariam, if BJP's policies were more integrated or pointing towards economic success, then we would like understand whether if they're like making any improvements in their electoral
but they
process.
are aligning it to economic and social developments as well. As we look at the temple's inauguration, of course, all the celebrities were invited, and of course they were talking about the economic boost that would be brought in after this inauguration of temple. So they are of course selling this to public as well.
So I think like most of the votes that BJP tries to get is situated, or it comes from the division that they have basically ensued in the Indian politics and Indian society. And then they couple that with like their economic performance as well. But if you look at the rise of communal politics in India, if you look at cow vigilantism, if you look at mob lynchings, if you look at how the minorities are treated in India, so that like basically goes to show that the rise of the Hindu nationalism comes at a cost of suppressing the rest of the minorities as well. And all of these policies that we are talking about, they are inherently anti-Islamic, and they're very inherently anti-minority as well. So if BJP, for example, was focusing on only the economic performance, then they wouldn't have the need to basically implement these policies which are very anti-minority. So clearly, most of the policies or their electoral significance comes from the fact that they want to prove that the Hindu identity is above any other identity there. And this is also reflected on the way they have revisionized the whole history of India as well.
Course.
The revisionist policies of the BJP.
They are marking other temples.
They are marking other temples. They are changing the history books as well, and they are portraying a lot of like Muslim leaders or the Muslim from the Mughal era or the Sultanate era. They are portraying them as invaders and people who were not really from India. And they're changing the history of India. If you look at Bollywood and the kind of movies that they're making, they're also like giving an alternative view of history which has nothing to do with the realistic like academic history there. And that is also sowing the seeds of division in the Indian society and making people inherently anti-Muslim.
Right. So, Mr. Naveed, don't you think that Narendra Modi is playing with very dangerous fault lines within Indian society, keeping in mind that the Constitution of India actually provides security to the minority rights?
It is absolutely right. Modi is really playing with that dangerous game. He has divided Indian society, not now. Many years back when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, that was a classical case of his brutality against the Muslims. And the way he butchered the Muslims as CM, and he was very successful with his performance. And the extremist Hindus, they followed his philosophy of politics, and he was brought in the center because of that, because he believes that he will banish Muslims from India and India will be the state for the Hindus. Nothing has changed with his emergence. If we talk about the situation pre-Pakistan, the pre-partition, same was the philosophy of the Hindus or the Hindu politicians when Pakistan was in making. By then, Congress was carrying it out. By now, BJP is carrying it out. But the way the BJP is carrying it out is the way of more fascism than politics or nationalism. Modi believes that the hatred, the division of Indian society will enable him to survive as a politician, as a Prime Minister of India once more. Yes, he can, because the majority of the population of India is Hindus. And the Hindus are being...
They're actually buying that narrative.
Definitely. And the hatred against the Muslims and the Christians, their hatred is not only against the Muslims, they are equally against the Hindus.
And even within Hindus as well,
yes,
the caste system.
Yes, they are, against the Sikhs, the Christians equally, because, there are many incidents in Canada. What happened in Canada and in America, they killed Najar in Canada, and conspiracy was, exposed in America.
Right.
One culprit was arrested in Czech Republic, and the Czech Republic government handed it over to America. It shows the spectrum of Indian Hindu politics is spread in all over the world.
Right.
Which is very, very dangerous for Indian society, and the separatist movements in Chhattisgarh, in Arunachal Pradesh, in UP, in CP, in Bihar, in Bengal. There are many, tens of the separatist movements are active in India, just because the life of the communities or the minorities in India is not safe, and they are ready to get rid of the Indian state, and they want their separate countries separate from India.
Right. So, Mr. Humayun, how do you think that, of course, BJP's emphasis on Hindutva ideology has, of course, influenced India's domestic and foreign policies? Like, of course, Mr. Naveed also alluded to the impact of these policies on foreign territories as well.
I think, I'll continue with what Naveed Saab was saying. Basically, Prime Minister Modi is playing with fire. The policies that he is trying to implement, and he's been very successful in implementing a lot of those policies up till now, and we have seen the secular face of India completely fading away, and a radical India is showing up. And this was also earlier mentioned by Shehzad as well, that this RSS mentality which is being followed by BJP, they are in the process of changing school textbooks. They are also in the process of inserting their dogmatic and pseudo-religious ideologies within these the fabrics of their society. The religion content is the hardcore fundamentalist religious Hindu content is being added in the fabrics of Indian society. And that is basically creating fissures, not only in domestically, and we have seen in like many places up till now, it's been like 8 or 9 or 10 months that Prime Minister Modi is as a Prime Minister. There has been 600 different incidents against Christians. There are thousands of incidents against Muslim all around India. Kashmir, we have already seen one of the biggest open jail in the world. And then to add fuel to the fire, their foreign policy is now basically a state-sponsored terrorism, which Naveed Saab earlier mentioned. There were multiple instances where any dissenting voice, be it in United States of America, be it in Canada, be it in Qatar, be it in UK, or be it in Pakistan. So the entire might of the Indian BJP mentality goes against them. And that's basically the exact definition of state terrorism.
Mr. Humayun, can you elaborate on the concerns raised regarding the suppression of dissent? Of course, you also are highlighting that there is suppression, and the laws like Counter-Terrorism Act are being used for suppression of such voices. Can you elaborate on that?
Mariam, there's not only one such act. There are multiple acts which has been used in terms of suppressing the voices of dissent within India and outside India. That's also the worrisome part.
Of course.
There are cases where they act under TADA, they act under UPA, they act under many draconian laws that they've enacted. And this was particularly the policy of BJP, that no dissent is acceptable, and particularly no dissent from either Christian, Muslim, or any other minority. So that's basically the worrisome part, that, the people who used to speak openly, now even the courts, look at the verdict of Supreme Court against this, the Babri Masjid, the whole saga of Babri Masjid. Look at what they have done with Article 370 and 35A, and the Supreme Court has basically followed. Look at their media. So it's basically an entire might of the state, which basically, along with other pillars of the state, are making this secular face of India into a very draconian, fundamentalist, and a religious face, which goes against the fabrics of their own constitution. You mentioned earlier, the constitution provides rights to minorities, constitution provides right, and the constitution of India still says it's a secular country. But we have seen the policies for last 2 terms of Prime Minister Modi. It is completely the opposite, and it has not only been opposite in the home, it has now gone outward, because he has become so fascist in his policies that he doesn't care what is happening in other countries. United States of America, along with other bigger countries, have raised concern. Even in the United Nations, Pakistan has given a lot of dossier in terms of their policies vis-a-vis Pakistan. And not only Pakistan, the Muslims, which constitute around 200 million plus people. So the idea is suppress them so much that they do not either, if they want to stay there, they just follow the policies of, and Sharyar mentioned earlier about mob lynching, where if somebody was seen as eating beef, they were killed. And there were not only one cases, there were thousands of cases which has happened in India. And international community has taken a lot of notice and cognizance of that. But unfortunately, since it's an economic big power, so they just keep quiet for their own national interest.
Of course. That's what I want to talk about, Mr. Humayun, that how it has all these suppression and oppression of minorities within India has impacted India's global standing and, of course, its ties with other countries.
This is a very worrisome situation in a way that the world has already seen what has been happening with minorities, particularly Muslim within India. Yet the voices that we see and the voices which could do something are either muted, or the response is unfortunately not up to the mark. The biggest countries are the allies of India. They support them because economically India is still a viable country. Then the big geopolitics comes in, where India and South Asia is becoming a bigger brother. It's like a policeman of the area, and United States of America support India in terms of its policy vis-a-vis China, in terms of its policy vis-a-vis Pakistan. So that is a very unfortunate thing, that the national interest of countries supersede the human rights violation which India is committing all around the world. So unfortunately, despite the fact that different media outlets, different organizations, human rights reports, human rights rapporteur in United Nations has given reports about the Indian human rights violations, still we see these countries just give either small statements, but they continue using business as usual with India. This is an unfortunate thing which we are seeing.
Right, of course. This is an unfortunate situation. Right, Mr. Naveed.
And a few words to Mr.
Humayun.
The creation of Pakistan is based on that mentality or approach or myth of Hindus of suppression. The Muslims were being suppressed by then before 47, and Pakistan came into being. Now, Hindus are again suppressing Sikhs and Christians and Muslims in India once again, and Khalistan is not being suppressed. Khalistan is one of the biggest movement of India after creation of Pakistan. And the approach is not changed. By then it was being carried out, as I earlier mentioned, by Congress, and now it is being carried out by BJP. So this approach will again divide India. It was divided in 47, and now it will be divided now, because he is ready to divide India by all means. For his seat, for his premiership, for the third time, he is dividing Indian society and Indian, political fabric. One thing which is very important between India as compared to India and China. In China, I have been to...
But there are maximum chances that Narendra Modi is going to be re-elected.
Yes, he will be.
Of course.
In China, I have been to China many times. I have seen the Uzbeks, Tajiks, the Tatars, the Mongols, the Uyghurs, the Muslims, all are living in a harmonious society, and they are living like brothers and sisters, a very happy, prosperous life, spending in one country. In India, you know, everybody is afraid of the suppression or the aggression or the
right, of course.
That sort of attitude of the Hindus or BJP or RSS in India. So they want to get rid of India. But in China, they don't want to get rid of anything.
Of
you know, they are living in a very good society.
This political dimension adds another dimension to all this societal issue as well. But Shahryar, what steps can be taken to address human rights violations, specifically regarding the minority rights suppression, both domestically and internationally as well?
So Mariam, first of all, the whole voices of the marginalized communities need to come out to the world as well. And we have also seen that the Office of the Human Rights Watch, which has been very vocal in basically bringing forward the suppression that the minorities are facing in India, and their office was closed by the Indian government. Other than that, a lot of UN organizations have also pointed towards human rights violations. Modi in the West, before becoming the Prime Minister of India, was known as the Butcher of Gujarat.
Right.
He was not even allowed to get a visa to enter the US territory.
Till 2014,
when he was first elected as the
yes.
Prime Minister. Now I basically see that the Western world, because of geopolitical and economic compulsions, and the fact that they see India as a pivot against China and as a future economic powerhouse, I personally feel that the human rights agenda has been superseded by these economic and geopolitical compulsions. What the world needs to understand is that yes, Modi and the BJP party is using and sowing these seeds of repression to get political gains, but this comes at a cost of the whole social fabric of the Indian society being dismantled piece by piece. And yes, Modi will come into power, he will probably get the third term, but the long-term implications for India as well as the region, they are not looking very good. And India being a very diverse society, it's over 1.5 billion people, and they're overtaking the population of China as well in the coming future. The survival of India as a country is based on the secular constitution. And when all of these different minorities, different ethnicities, people with different languages, different backgrounds, see that they're not welcomed and they're systematically being crushed by the Indian government, and if they see all the political institutions, the courts, the bureaucracy, and everyone is working collectively to suppress the voices of the minorities, and they don't see themselves as part of the society, then this will have a very devastating impact on the whole unity of India overall.
Right.
And culminate in different new countries because of the same approach.
Right.
The approach which was being carried out earlier, now the same is being carried out.
It is impacting the very fabric of Indian society as well. So lastly, Mr. Humayun, what do you see that, of course, what is the way forward? We know that India is, of course, not only violating its own constitution that gives security to minorities, but also is in violation of international conventions as well. So what's the way forward?
Well, that's a $1 million question. I think, ideally speaking, the way forward would be that India should mend its way, and the policies or the laws which they've created, the foreign policy, aggressive foreign policy that it has taken against not only Pakistan, but all its neighbor. They should amend their ways. But unfortunately, and as we have discussed and other participants also alluded to that, most likely Prime Minister Modi will win the third term. And this will continue. But this is exactly as I was earlier saying, he's playing with the fire. We have seen such policies backfired in Middle East, in South Asia, and other countries. So if he continues on this particular trajectory, it's not only going to be bad for his own country, it's going to be bad for the entire region. So for that, I guess the only thing which Shahryar also already mentioned, I think there has to be a concerted effort from international community to put some sense into Prime Minister Modi in terms of the aggressive, and not only aggressive, but inhuman policies that he has taken against his own population, by the way. When we have mentioned about Sikh, we have mentioned about Naxalite, we mentioned about Maoist, Muslims, Christians, and even like 200 million Dalits, which are living in India in a miserable condition. So unless and until that secular form of India comes back, it's going to be a great danger for the entire region. And this BJP led by Prime Minister Modi will create such a big disturbance, not only for Pakistan, but for the entire South Asian region, that we will be unable to go back from there.
Of course, of course. Thank you very much, Mr. Humayun Khan, for your valuable input. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheryar Khan, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Naveed Aman Khan, for joining us in today's program. Of course, we talked about the violations of minority rights in India, and of course, surrounding, especially after the recent developments of construction of Ram temple as well. And these violations of minority rights within India have echoed beyond borders. Now this is on of course international community to take notice of these human rights violations and make India accountable. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.